Welcome everyone. Buonasera. Buonasera from Italy and to Italy, and buon pomeriggio, good afternoon in Chicago. It's a pleasure to welcome you to our second conversation of the series Le Voci della Natura. Conversations are following the presentations that Professor Giovanni Aloi unfolded in the first part of the year. Last a couple of weeks ago, we talked to Gabi Scardi. So we investigated the representation of nature and ecology in modern in contemporary art from the perspective of the curator. And while today we are very happy to welcome Andrea Conte, and so one of the most renowned Italian visual artists that is tackling the topics that we are investigating in this series. So welcome, Andrea, and thank you for waiting for us until this late hour at night. Andrea Conte is the director of art studio at Studio Andreco. He's a visual artist and an environmental engineer with a PhD in sustainability and resources management. He conducted his postdoctoral researches at the School of Engineering and Architecture of the University of Bologna and at Columbia University in New York. Environmental, social, and climatic justice are Andrea's main and deepest concerns. And as an artist, he focuses on the relationship between humans, the ecosystem, and landscape. Throughout the last 20 years, he has created a transdisciplinary conceptual and visual language embracing science, ecology, activism, urbanism, anthropology, philosophy, biology, and symbolism. Climate Art Project and FLUMEN are two examples of such complex artistic research, and we will soon hear more in details about such projects. I'm also pleased to welcome Professor Giovanni Aloi, good friend of us all and of the Italian Cultural History in Chicago. Welcome, Giovanni. Thank you again for your contribution to this series. Professor Giovanni Aloi is an author, an educator, and a curator specializing in the representation of nature in art. He has published with Columbia University Press, Phaidon, MIT, Lawrence King, and Prestel. He has contributed to BBC radio programs, worked at Whitechapel Art Gallery and Tate Galleries in London. And in the US, he is a correspondent for S Magazine, as well as a regular speaker at the Art Institute of Chicago. Professor Aloi has as well curated exhibitions in the US and Europe, and he currently teaches modern and contemporary art at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and Sotheby's Institute of Art, New York and London. So thank you both. Without further ado, I leave the floor to you for this interesting conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. I have to do a small introduction. Yes, Climate Art Project is my main project that overlaps scientific and artistic research. And I use art, the language of art, for underline some problem and possible climate action. And is an itinerant project that also multimedia project. So tonight I'm going to try to, tonight in Italy and this afternoon in US, I will try to show some example, one example for every media. So an installation, a sculpture, and a wall painting, and a performance. Starting from the image that you select for the cover of this talk, is an installation made of plant and soil and a metal sculpture. And actually the plants are fern and hemp because those plants are able to treat the soil from the metal pollutant. So bringing the plants in the white cube doesn't mean just a poetic action, but want to address the scientific research on nature-based solution, which is the research that I study the most, that are solutions that study the ecosystem, to the process in the ecosystem to solve problems related to the human beings. and also they are used for adapt climate change and mitigate climate change. Since 10 years, I'm doing this installation with the plants. This is another view of installation that sometimes combined with these textile works. In this case, are flags that with the plants, with leaves as weapons for this rule that plants have in the ecosystem to regenerate it. And basically, the exhibition in this case was related to a public program, and so there are also some outdoor activities as a performance, and actually the plants of the installation were used for a pilot experimental project of phytoremediation that is part of nature-based solution. So we analyzed the soil of a plot for understanding, despite how much like the plants can treat the pollutant from the soil. And so we analyzed before and after the vegetation period, and we discover the result of the depuration. This was by the river Aniane. We was able to publish this scientific research on a journal for environmental planning and management, a scientific journal, but we now publish also the part related to the shows and the art performance. So a goal in this project was to speak about art also in science. So the title of this paper is Nature-Based Solution on the River Environment, an example of cross-disciplinary sustainable management with local community active participation and visual art as a science transfer tool. So it's a goal for me to break boundaries between disciplines and speak about science in art and art in science. Another more visionary approach to the landscape are my work related to with the flags. I works with the invented flags since many years, more than 10 years, maybe 50, and I have an archive of 400 flags that are non-identitarian flags, but are flags for the non-human, flags for the river, for the green spaces, for the mountain. Of course, it's a provocation, but it's a need to move the view to the landscape and to the non-human. And I use these flags for small action and performance as a workshop, as the one with the Aula Verde, where with some citizens we decide to plant all together some trees in this project that is a urban forest, but is also a land art project and a nature-based solution. But I use flags especially with in performance that are more in choreography in the public space, and I want to bring the example of Parata Tiberina, Parade for the River Tiber. And when the city of Rome commissioned to me the performance for the New Year Eves, I decided to celebrate the river Tiber, and I did it with the help of Roma Europa Foundation. They run the biggest festival theater in Rome, and the Opera Theater, the National Academy of Music, Santa Cecilia. More than 100 persons was involved in this project. The idea was to celebrate the river, because in the past the river was venerated. We had a god that's called Tiberino, and was venerated for the importance of the river for the life of the city, the health of the city and of the citizen. But now the river is very polluted since the Industrial Revolution, or maybe also before. And this performance was made for create a culture of the river, and of course to make an advocacy to the river. So the performer were in this case the river itself that was flooding in the city, in the center of the city. Actually, this is the oldest temple in good condition that we have in Rome, Tempio di Ercole. And it was not made for entertainment, but was made for address ecological issues, that is the condition of the river in Rome. From every performance, I produce a video, and the video was presented at the National Museum of Contemporary Art, Maxi, in this March. Also, this is a very old practice for me. I did 15 performances in the last 15 years, almost 1 year. And what remained from this performance are this video and the flags, of course. In this show, for example, there are 2 monitors with the one that is the second time that I shown the Parata Tiberina, and I was in Palermo at the Fondazione Merz, and it's in a show that just ended last week. It was a collective show, and in the other monitor there are the video of the performance that I did in Delhi, when I discovered that Delhi in 2018 was addressed as the city most polluted city for air pollution in the world, and that I did the performance about reclaiming air and water in the city. So, and in the Arazzo on the right, I don't know if it's visible, and is also a non-human textile, I say, flag that show the an invented the water cycle, say an imaginary water cycle, and the other 2 are rivers. Again, there are the Tevere and Aniene, the 2 rivers of Rome, and the pink one are the 3 rivers of Palermo, which only one is visible now, and the other 2 are invisible because are tombed because of the evolution of the city. They decide to tomb the river, so they go underground, but I decide to make it visible in the flag. All right. Okay, the outdoor of the building, there are the flags that I used for the parade, Parata Tiberina. Okay, another project is wall painting that is in Venice and is part of a climate art project. It's a climate number 4, and of course in Venice I decided to speak about sea level rise, because Venice is one of the cities most affected of sea level rise, and so this wall painting show the recent studies on forecast related to sea level rise and extreme waves. If you, at the bottom of the wall, there's 2017, and that was the year that I did this wall painting. And going up, you can see the forecast in 2040, 2080, and 2100. And that these are the forecasts for IPCC, that is Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, the most important organism that release reports related to climate change and the effect of climate change. And if you see the other line, that's also 2100, is another study that from Ramstorff, that is a professor that considered mostly the contribution of the melting of the ice, of the polar ice. And in 2200, there will be more than 2 meters. In this moment, I'm tracing the top part of the world that is address the problem related to extreme wave events due to climate change. And there are some formula that are the formula that study this phenomenon. Okay, those are the reference that I used to my my sketch, and this is the paper that addressed the relation between sea level rise and temperature rise, and temperature rise and CO2 emissions. So reducing the CO2 emission, we can change this forecast. And what to do when I have this amount of data and studies with the help in collaboration with Center for Research, I decided what to trace on the wall. And this is a sketch that I did. And I decided to don't make the maximum data, the maximum level, but to use the average because it was already scary enough. And in terms of sea level rise. And on the top part, the study related to the extreme wave. In fact, this is the classical shape of that the scientists study for find the top of the wave, so the delta H, and also other parameter in the wall. Okay, this wall painting is 100 meter long, and it's the first wall painting ever authorized on the Grand Canal in Venice, and is at the train station. The city, after 5 years, this year decided that is very important for the city, and so they decided to keep it permanently. Also with the Heritage Commission, they decided to keep it. And but this is a pointing operation, I say. It's something that addressed the problem. But in my artwork, I was to speak also about a possible future scenario. And always the future scenario, the best practice for me are related to plants. So, okay, this is in the train station. Right? So studying the plants, the most important things in Venice are the lagoon, the wetlands, for protecting that from always, they protect Venice from sea level rise, from the sea level rise. So they are very important, of course, for biodiversity, but also for saving the sea. And so I decided to do this semi-dry sculpture in iron, painted gold, with a small garden of plants of the lagoon underneath. And this is, of course, another sculpture related to nature-based solution and to the importance of the plant. And we did many dissemination and for this kind of a project. So going back to the beginning, speaking about sculpture and plants, a similar sculpture, I did it in Bologna, but this time the plants were climber plants. This is interesting to me because the plants slowly the cover completed the sculpture, and every year, and after with the in the winter time, they of course this valley make it visible again and again they cover it. And this process make the sculpture in a continuous transformation. And this is something that really like, and is part of my the concept related to the sculpture, because it's in a way to move the point of view from an egocentric anthropocentric point of view to an ecocentric point of view, because the ego of the artist don't disappear under the plants. But for me, actually, the plants become sculpture. It's a moving sculpture, but the plants are part of the sculpture itself. And so go back to the beginning that I showed that with that trench, with the plants and the sculpture. So if you see, this is a project from 2013, so many years ago. And after reading the latest philosophy related to new materialism, or the philosophy related to ecology or political ecology, are really connected to this way of thinking. So there was many intellectual confirmation about this thought. Okay, I want to end. I have still some minutes, but speaking about another collateral consequences of this work as climate art project. Of course, this work was published on the Art magazine, but what was interesting for me that they break also the communication, the scientific communication. For example, this is Climate Kick. It is it's a communication organ from the European Community for speaking about dissemination about climate change. And they find this artwork in a way useful for the debate on climate change. And this was the page of the Minister of the Environment, the German Minister of the Environment. They used that picture that I showed to you before for explaining the last report of IPCC to the politician in Germany. So for me, it was interesting to see how art can go between can go to other boundaries and other part of the society, and not just remaining in the art system. This is a book for the high school where they mentioned my work in the contemporary green art. So I want to leave you with some book. This Contro Nature is a book that which I wrote a chapter, and it's a book of philosophy and practice, theory and practice related to political ecology. And I have the opportunity to write a chapter related to political ecology and art. And there are the theory behind my work, and part of that. And this is it's a book of a geography, which I wrote the postscription. And the last one, which I'm very happy that I did just the cover of Don Harvey McKinkin book, the Italian version, which I love Don Harvey, and so I was very proud of that. Okay, thank you. I make it short, 20 minutes, almost, and so we have time for more questions to discuss and go more deep if you find something more interesting than other things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Wonderful presentation. So many interesting works. It's really exciting to have the opportunity to hear you talk about them, because I can sense the enthusiasm that I imagined was behind the works. I have been looking at your work now for some time, and there is a sense that you really care about the subject of your work, and that you waste no opportunity to experiment with different media in order to convey the message to different audiences. And I find that particularly interesting. One of the questions I have is with regards to your aesthetic, because your work is particularly iconic. I'm thinking about the painting and the mural work that you do. And this black surfaces that appear to be fragmented. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what the aesthetic of your images entails.
Yes, so, thank you for the question. I used to paint human and animals a long time ago, and at one point I decided to move the perspective to other elements, because if you think that engraving that probably I mentioned to you is the Scala Naturae, that put like as the most important things the humans, and after the animal, after the plants, at the really end the the mineral and the geology, so the inorganic material. So I decided to completely blow up this idea, and to put as most important things the geology, and after the plants. And because I would like to move the perspective from anthropocentric to ecocentric, and to give importance and to give some intrinsic value to nature itself in terms of geology and plants in this case. And so the human and so what he used is usually is I try to make minimal images with strong intrinsic meanings, and I think the idea was to make a like symbol for this research related to sustainability, climate justice, social justice. And so this is also why I use flags in a way. So there are symbolic images that want to resume contemporary issue related to ecology.
Yeah, and it really comes across. I think there is something interesting about the accessibility of your images, which is something that I find complicated in terms of the range of artists that I have encountered working with the environment. One of the things that I've noticed is that some artists tend to reinterpret or follow a personal dimension that's very much driven on an emotional reconnection with nature, which is also very interesting. And there are artists who are more engaged with the scientific data and with the question of how to translate this data so that it becomes accessible to people. Of course, you're a scientist by training, so I'm assuming that data is not that mysterious for you. Can you tell us about how you negotiate these two dimensions, and how do you elaborate data into visuals so that it produces a message that goes beyond just illustrating data? It seems to me that your work does a lot more than that, so it becomes art.
Yeah, it's very difficult. You're right. It's very difficult to keep together like the scientific part and the more emotional part, and so the more tribal and ritualistic part in a way, no? But since I really like to bring the complexity all together, because it's needed, like a complex topic as climate change, as ecosystems that are really complex and all connected, needs a multidisciplinary approach and a multi-view on a lateral view, a critical view on the aspect. And I want to quote Andrew Revkin that I met in at Columbia Health Institute, and he said, "How do you convey urgency and complexity at the same time?" I think it's exactly that. Like, it's important to speak about data and also keep the emotional part, but not to simplify too much because you want to communicate to all. I was always thinking that also, for example, wall painting, that is something that is in the street, everyone can see. And I don't want to find an easy clap. I say an easy. I want to make it. I want to keep it complex. I want to keep the concept how they are, because it's needed to know what they are exactly against around ecology, and not to simplify and go on the naive part or on a greenwash part, you know. So it's important to keep the complexity, and of course, I finish this. And an image in art is always open for me, like open to interpretation of the public. So it's more ambiguous, you know, the language of art, and this is why I also touch the deep of the sensibility of the person, because they can make it for themselves, they can feel it as with a personal background and a personal feeling in a way. And so it's very complex, the job, but I'm trying to keep the complexity and the urgency at the same time.
And can I ask as well, who are your artistic references? You've also talked about philosophy. You mentioned that you like Donna Haraway. I see a quote from Timothy Morton, who's another very important author. So it sounds like you're also not just negotiating the scientific and the artistic lens, but you're also bringing in the philosophical discourse, which is important, so important, I think, to actually negotiating the two. It would be a cliche to say that you're a Renaissance man, of course, so we leave that out, but I said it anyway. But I was wondering too about your artistic influences.
Of course, what I do, I have to see the past and the 60 or like the land art movement. I have the opportunity to do a show with Oppenheim with some work, from some land artist, and it was a different approach. But I'm of course in love with Richard Long and all the land artists. But also a big reference for me is Joseph Beuys for the social sculpture and what to do with art in terms of political output of the job. So in terms of the society, Joseph Beuys is also a big reference. And there is an Italian artist that is in Rome that is Baruchello, that he also did a project related to the environment with Agricola Cornelia in the 70s, and he's still alive, he's 90 years old, and I had the opportunity to meet him and to do some speech together. So of course, all the people that work in the ecology field are a part of my background, but also others that just for their approach as Enrico Bai, for the freedom in multimedia that he had, like to every time experimenting new media. That was important for me to experiment, as you mentioned.
Right. Yeah, it's really striking how you engage with different aesthetics as well as different media in ways that, again, seem to be very natural. I'm also curious about your interest in plants, because it recurs a lot. It's obviously a subject you have talked about tonight, but you also mentioned how it is one of your main subjects. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how you became interested in plants, and also what role do they play in your everyday life beyond your artistic engagement?
Okay. My house is full of plants, of course.
I was hoping you'd say that.
yeah, but well, like I did this PhD on nature-based solution. It was very strange at that time because in engineering there was no course on plants, and I was teaching 8 years in the last year of engineering, speaking about how important are the plants for the water management, for the island effect mitigation, or the temperature mitigation, but it was considered very weird, very like in a way naive in science. But for me, I was always really fascinated from the plants, and in particular, some of them, like fern, is more than 15 years doing installation with fern. There are a lot of variety of fern, and I'm very interested of how they are able to distribute pollutant. But also, I always feel that plants are better than every artwork I can do, basically. So if there are, for example, if there are a tree in the middle of a wall, I always like leave it there and I say, I do something nearby just for, but I always feel that are the most important things. And I was very fascinated by plants in a way. And so I'm keep working on this path.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned how working with plants until recently was unusual, or even like contemplating the idea of working with plants was seen as unusual in institutions, and now things have changed very rapidly. I actually remember that when I started my PhD in London, it was roughly around 2010. I knew that up until that point, I had specialized in the representation of animals in contemporary art, and I was very interested in taxidermy. So I thought that subject was going to allow me to explore a lot of philosophical and artistic backgrounds that I was interested in. But I remember a day that I had a tutorial with my PhD supervisor, and she also loves plants. And we were just kind of like riffing off each other, and she did ask me, it's like, why don't you do a PhD on plants, because you're so passionate about them? And I just said, well, you know, it really sounds like nobody is going to take me seriously if I do take my PhD, focus my PhD on plants. And I was also thinking, especially with the context of what you can teach afterwards. You know, when you apply for a job, the specialization matters. You know, like universities will want to know, what can you teach our students? And taxidermy, of course, falls into the 19th century colonialism. And it just seemed like, yeah, that's always going to be a talking point. And plants felt like not quite sure where that's going to go and how much I'm going to be marginalized with a choice like that. And I'm happy. My PhD worked out really well, and I think the work I've done with taxidermy has been very well received. But at the back of my mind, it feels like I should probably take another one with plants, because now the audience feels a lot more receptive. That's important too. I don't know if we have any questions, Luca, from the audience or from you.
Not yet, but I do encourage our audience to use the Q&A tab to ask questions to Andrea. In the meanwhile, first I would like to, since Andrea talked about Venice and showed his stunning mural work on the Canal Grande, I would like to remind that actually just yesterday, we presented here at the Istituto, in cooperation with Chicago Architectural Biennial, a book by Ludovico Centis, an architect from Venice, that is called The Lake of Venice, dedicated to redesigning and rethinking about the scenarios for what will happen to the Venice Lagoon by in 80 years, in 2100. And it's a very interesting book visually as well. And I've just pasted a link to the book in the chat for anyone who would be interested. And while I was actually very impressed and touched by Andrea's work, especially the one in Venice, because in general, I'm very impressed by this relation between art and that of including, let's say, science and mathematic formulas in artworks, and especially this one in Venice. I find this very, because you mentioned also tribalism and the emotional side of art, and this is a, let's say, inserting into the tribalism a different kind of language that has a complete different appeal to people's emotion. And to me, this makes everything more scary. So even in the end, everything becomes even more tribal and brutal, because it's not just a desperate cry of an artist in front of the world collapsing, but it tells us that actually something is happening and will happen. So I guess I imagine that this has a very strong impact on people, on the public, beyond also the audience that usually follows contemporary art. So I would like to ask, after this long non-question, I would like to ask Andrea what is his feeling and perception about how people react to his works. And
yes, okay. As people have different reaction, of course, it depends from their background. The work of Venice is true. I said before, is a pointing operation about the problem. No? So putting the data of the scientific forecast there is very scary. The people have this reaction. The people from Venice knew very well, better than me, that there is this problem that in 100 years probably Venice will disappear if we continues in business as usual like that with the emission. And the things that the people know this, but it remove it for their brain, because it's too painful to think that your city is gonna sink. So there is this psychological operation to remove the problem because it's too big. It's an hyper object, as Timothy Martin said. No? But actually, what I like the most is trying to speak also about what we can do in a way to envision possible future and other scenarios. So this is why I talk a lot about plants in nature-based solutions, because before the pandemic, probably since the COVID, I used to do very catastrophic artwork, and I think about the Anthropocene parade that I did at Museo Pecci in Prato, with the flags in the end was very catastrophic. But now I'm trying to address possible climate action, things that we can do, or future alternative for the future, because I prefer to contribute to this debate. And what I like the most to speak with the people is about that, more about the solution that just talking about the problem, because otherwise it can paralyze the people. If the problem is so big, you feel small and nothing you can do. So
I was actually going to ask you, Andrea, how optimistic are you in the context of climate change? Sometimes I swing between feeling like all that we do matters and it is changing people's perspectives. I remember 20 years ago, especially in academia, that wasn't the case. Now you can have conversations about plants, animals, climate change. There are courses on climate change, the sixth extinction, and the panorama is changing very rapidly. What is your take in how rapidly is it changing, and how do you feel the response of like different governments to climate change? Can we be optimistic?
Well, it's difficult to be optimistic in this situation, but I see the path. I see that I'm very happy, as you said, that now these topics are more mainstream, are more known, like sustainability is everywhere. But I think it's more mediatic things that are real change. I feel that this ecological transition that everybody speak about it is not happening fast enough. Mm-hmm. So we have to be faster in this, because scientists say that we don't have time. So I see the path for the change, but I see also a lot of people, a lot of interest in make it slower, and that's it's a big risk to slow down the process. I think now is the time to go very fast and change all the industrial sector, using other sources, renewable resources. But and it's not only that. It's not only a technical transition. It's also a cultural transition, a philosophical transition, and why not ecological and artistical transition? It's also we have to change our way to stay in society and in this planet, and it's not only technical point, but we have to change perspective. And so this is why I think that also from an artistic point of view, we have to change completely point of view. But I don't know if I reply. Sometimes I'm optimistic, sometimes I'm very scared, but what I feel the most that we are too slow in this change.
Yes, I agree with you. I feel this kind of swinging, and certainly feeling like we are too slow, especially if, like me, you've been involved in this conversation for a long time. And when you look back and you think, wow, 20 years ago, there was almost no receptivity to these subjects. That 20 years have gone by, and we know that the last 20 years have been terrible for the degrade of the health of the planet. So the question really becomes, can we wait another 20 years? However, I have to say, I was really pleased to see that your work is now featured in a college art book. Was it an art book, or was it just a book on a broader subject?
No, it's a new college art book from,
An art book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah, there is
wonder.
they put new chapter. Of course, it's at the end of the book, so I don't know. You have to open for the reverse, for reading
Right.
because I don't know if the program will reach, the contemporary art.
I know the classic
Yeah, for me,
Italian.
that I don't know exactly. It starts, from Caravaggio to the end,
Right.
to now, to today. But yeah, I don't know if the program arrived to speak about that. But I was very curious when I was a student. I used to open the book to reverse for last page. So, and now this is very happy because the future generation are the one that are most involved in this problem, and I really put all my hope in them, in the kids, and I really like to speak with them. As you see, I do some talks also focus with kids sometimes to some dissemination thing. So, but because it's important, and it's also they're very creative, and they will find a new solution that we cannot think about it. So I really believe they can invent new things and to solve the problems.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great. I'm thinking about my history of art books when I was like 16, 17. The environment was just not a subject. I mean, you could barely see works of art involving animals and plants beyond the Dutch Golden Age, and then it was just like, yeah, done. And we know that the Dutch Golden Age is not about nature. I mean, the flowers are representative, they're symbolic, they're representative of Christian values and moral and ethical values. So it's a kind of false economy where you're looking at all these beautiful flowers, but you're really looking away at us again. And I think it's great that at least, art books are starting to incorporate chapters, even if they're at the end. I actually wanted to ask you something in relation to that, because I remember that when I was at school in Italy, and also during my high school years or the equivalent, there was always this tendency not to engage with the closer, more recent history. Like, for instance, my art history program kind of ended in the 1930s with Picasso, because it was like so much of what happened recently, it's too fresh for us to really understand it and comment on it. And I don't know if that idea is still kind of like permeating the way teaching happens in Italy, or the way in which certain cultural currents move in Italy, because I wonder how detrimental that might be to a contemporary subject like this that's very urgent, if professors feel that it's too now for us to engage with it head on, or just to take a challenge.
I think so that a new generation of teacher will speak more about the contemporary in general. So friends that teach in school, they always do parallel with the nowadays culture, what's going on. And but yeah, I was also in this. I'm with you totally. Also, my education was like that. Or the program was like. Didn't touch the last centuries. So, but I think this it will change. What they see, like also in this public work that we do with rivers, we have a program for citizen science with kids. Also, I'll show you some picture. This is also very interesting. Like this is with school, so I think. School is starting to do a lot of like outdoor activities, like not in the program. And for example, this citizen science approach is interesting, which is where like the citizen, in this case, the kids become a scientist. And here they learn how to analyze the river water, chemical analysis to test, and biological analysis. And this is, I just involved some schools from Rome, and it was near the river. So there are a lot of outdoor activities also, not probably in the program, but that there are the possibility to do different experience. And of course, there are a lot of outdoor activity that are interested in the ecological themes now. So it was easy for us to involve schools in this kind of project.
That's
and,
wonderful to hear.
and it worked.
Yeah, it's really important.
Yeah.
We need to educate children differently. We need to educate them from a very young age. I think primary school is actually one of the most, I mean, the whole education range is important, but primary school is probably the most important in the sense that if we can instill some excitement for nature in these children, then they probably care for it later on. Even my generation and yours probably were not really invited to look at nature, value it too much as part of the curriculum, especially, you know, so it was like very, very disconnected with what was going on with the environment, and that certainly hasn't helped anybody. I think also in what you do, and then we'll let you go because it's almost midnight in Italy. It's really interesting because what I see in your practice, just in your work as a scientist, artist, working with different media, performance, two-dimensional installations in the gallery space. Also, we could go on for hours talking about your engagement with bioart, because when you work with plants, that falls into another dimension. The philosophical backbone that you follow. And also this field workshop activity that you have where it's hands-on and enthusing children and partaking into education programs. There's really, to me, a very interesting model of the artist of the future that luckily is also the artist of the present in this case. You know, it's a format that I hope other artists will take on more readily, because I know you also do gallery work. Like I've seen some beautiful prints that you do. There is a dimension in which the more kind of old school idea of being an artist can be integrated with new ways of being an artist, which entails teaching, which entails like doing workshops and working in different scenarios that are not traditional. I think that's really great. Just wanted to mention that. To me, it's one of the most interesting aspects of how you see yourself as an artist.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, if it's a question, I see art as a research, and I see artwork as applied research. So I just try to make prototype of ideas and theories, and to overlap ideas and theories and research for do a multidisciplinary artworks, and that it's just an experiment. I keep experimenting all the time, and I keep this part of risk of failing, because sometimes when you try something new, it can go wrong. But it's a continuing, like, pushed by curiosity, trying to do something different, experimenting new media, and see what's happened. The important part for me, as you say, the strong concept in terms of research, to build a strong research in terms of knowledge, and also speaking with other person, because I want to mention that, for example, for plants, I work a lot with biologists, because they know better a lot, like the plants itself, how it works, because my background as engineers, environmental engineer, we see the plants as a green infrastructure. I were not very expert in the process in the plants itself, that is more like molecular biologists, and I learned a lot from them. And but with this knowledge, it's important to have an hard rock, like a very solid research from where you can jump, and from there you can jump in the vision, and the vision is the artwork. But the important is have this very solid research underneath, and this is my things from this research. After I jump in different media and I try to experiment in different artworks, the research is at the base of everything, and every time I'm skip update and as in go forward. So I feel that I'm still at the beginning of that.
That's great, and it's great to hear, because I think we need more of these projects and artworks to inspire new generations. That's for sure. But thank you very much, Andrea, for spending time with us today. It's a pleasure to have had the opportunity to look at your work again and hear more from you. And hopefully we'll have the opportunity to meet in person sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrea, from my side as well. And I would really like to congratulate you for your stunning artwork and your commitment to the future of our planet and to talking to people, because really this is art that talks to the people, and this is something really, really important. So now it's time to say good night to Andrea as well.
Thank you very much.
I also hope we will manage to find ways to cooperate in the future and cross path again here in Chicago. Before saying, I thank also Giovanni, of course, for this conversation and for his contribution to our investigation on nature and ecology in art. And before saying goodbye to everyone else, I would like to remind you to stay tuned, because on December 1st, we will have the last conversation with Giovanni and another guest that we still keep secret to create some suspense. So I hope to see you all again on December 1st. And thank you again, Andrea and Giovanni.
Bye,
Ciao.
thanks.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.